Hey, this is Bailey.
And I'm Timothy.
And welcome to Wet Sleep Podcast.
Let's get right into it.
Woo. Henry VIII.
Crazy guy.
Was absolutely insane. He was born in Kent, England in 1491 as Henry Tudor.
That's so long ago.
Yeah. That's 600 years ago? No, 500 years ago. 1491.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm bad at math.
During his childhood, by the age of 4, guess how many titles he had? You don't have to guess because I'm gonna tell you. Oh.
Is it what's it called? The Queen of Dragons, savior of people, Daenerys.
So by the age of 4, this kid had been given the title of Constable of Dover Castle, Lord Warden of the Cinque Ports, Earl Marshal of England, Lord Lieutenant of Ireland, Knight of the Bath, which is a British order of chivalry, so he's like a knight, Duke of York, Warden of the Scottish Marches, and he was appointed to the Order of the Garter. By the age of 4, this man did more in his 4 years of life than I've done in my entire 24 years of life.
To be fair, half of those titles you can just go online and buy now and get certificates for them.
Yeah.
I could pay $150 and become a Lord of Ireland.
Yeah, I think isn't it you buy a plot of land, like an acre of land or something to keep it preserved, and then you can call yourself the Lord of the land or something?
I don't know.
I want to do that. I think that's what it is.
That'd be pretty lit.
That is a lit, because it's to preserve the land and keep it pretty and stuff, make sure that it's not developed on, and you can be the Lord of your land. And then, you'll probably never go to visit it, but...
And then when the government decides that they want to try and, build condos on your land... You can go to war! They gotta either pay you lots of money or you can be like, no, and then they can try to invade you, and then you can defend your land.
I need to get some land.
A tyrannical government.
Oh, God. That's awesome. All right,
that was a really long tangent.
No, that's okay. That's awesome. I want to be a lady of the land. All right. So the reason that he got all of these titles was that his father rushed all of the appointments in order to keep personal control of position over all of these things.
Makes sense.
In power. And so it was mostly to prevent other established families from getting that power. So he's like, well, I'm just going to give it all to my son because I'm the king. So
yeah, because you should give a 4-year-old all that power. Makes total sense.
Well, back in the day, obviously, I can't remember what it's called, but there's a thing where you rule in the stead of the king if they're not old enough. I can't remember what it's called, but it's pretty much the kid is technically the king, but you're the one that makes the decisions.
Not mature enough.
Yeah, because a lot of times they would send them away to nobility school. And
what was that? Wasn't that a thing in the Prince of Egypt movie? No, that wasn't.
I don't know. I don't think I've ever seen The Prince of Egypt.
That's such a good movie.
Is
Super
it?
Underrated, dude.
Oh.
The music in it is all bop, dude.
All right. So he was given, obviously, as a prince and potential king of England, he was given a first-rate education. He was given all the top tutors in the land, and went to all the prestigious schools and stuff, and they all came to his house to teach him.
Could you imagine?
No.
Being the future king of England and then go to some hoity-toity private school. All the kids would be afraid to talk to you.
Yeah.
Because you can literally just be die.
Bro, yeah, that, and also there's got to be some that are you need to be his best friend because we need to get in on that get into his court, basically. Yeah. So you got pressure from your parents and terror from the future king of England. Like,
that's just so much pressure.
No. Especially because he's insane.
Well, getting all that stuff at that young of an age, I understand why. He had all that power at that young of an age. He could literally do whatever he wanted.
He could have chosen to be a better person.
I mean, he could have, but,
he didn't have to, so that's why he didn't. But
being kind of subjected to like all that that young,
I guess, but you're not starving. People were starving and didn't have the care that he got.
Exactly. So why is he like, I don't care about these peasants? Right. What do they offer me?
Let's see.
I don't know, taxes.
Taxes. So after his brother's death, which obviously then put him in line, he was 10 years old at the time of his brother's death. Henry became another title for you, the Duke of Cornwall. Cornwall.
So it makes 9 titles.
And the new Prince of Wales and Earl of Chester.
Okay, so now we're up to 11.
So King Henry VII, his father, didn't let him do much when he got those titles because
he's like
sure he was in line to be the king, but his brother was first, and I think he died of gout or something. So once he died, his father was like, okay, well, I staked my entire succession on my first son, so now I've got to give it to Henry. But Henry's 10, and he didn't really like Henry as much as his other son. Because, I mean, he put all of that training and stuff into his first son, and now he's mad because he's like, all right, well, he died, so.
Dang, gotta make another.
So he got the titles, but his father didn't really let him out in public much. He didn't get a lot of experience, like, as far as kingly duties, because his father didn't give him any duties or anything. So he pretty much was like, yeah, you're the next king, but we're not going to worry about that.
You're just going to have to wing it.
Basically.
So yeah, of course this kid's going to be like one messed up ruler. He literally knows nothing about it and is going to get thrusted into the position.
So yeah, he did ascend the throne very quickly. And eventually, he was named the King of England. But again, he didn't know what he was doing due to lack of experience. He wasn't a very popular king, basically.
How is it that someone can get a seat of power like that with no experience, but I need 4 years of experience to work at Taco Bell? I'm just saying.
Times have changed. Our standards have gotten much higher.
Oh, yeah, okay.
All right, so let's move on to his adult love life.
He had one of those?
Which was insane. Oh.
What's that?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what that is.
So Henry married 6 times and had 9 living children.
Jesus.
Catherine, which was his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, was actually married to Henry's brother before he died. And she was set to be the queen. So, like, in the interest of, how kings do kingdoms do the thing where, like, they marry a woman from this kingdom to a king of this kingdom to, like, make
the Red Wedding.
The Red Wedding.
Game of Thrones.
I never watched Game of Thrones.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I can't get into it. I've tried many times. So at the age of 17, Henry actually married Catherine to affirm the family's alliance with Spain. So when he was 17, it was finally his time to become the king.
Gotcha.
Or not the king, but be married to ally with him.
Yeah, I get you.
Catherine had their first child, a daughter, Mary. And not obviously, but unfortunately, this frustrated Henry as he wanted a son to succeed him. After the birth of his daughter, Henry kept 2 mistresses.
Jeez, player, dude.
Eventually, that resulted, of course, in their divorce by the age of 41. So, like, they were together for, I think, something like 18 years or something like that.
Not bad.
So she stuck with it for a while.
I'm surprised they let that happen.
What?
Like a divorce.
A divorce? Well, hold on.
Oh, okay.
There was some...
Like I know of Henry VIII. I don't know a whole lot about him.
There was some wild things this man did. One of his mistresses had a sister by the name of Anne Boleyn.
Okay.
And Anne Boleyn's sister, I think her name was Mary Boleyn. Mary actually introduced Henry and Anne together because Mary was like, hey, I don't think this marriage is going to work out. You should kind of get in there while you can, basically. and they kind of started meeting in secret. So she wasn't like an official mistress, because that was a thing, which is wild, but she wasn't an official mistress.
Well, I guess, when you're the king, you can literally do whatever you want.
Whatever you want. Well, as long as it's cool with the church, which I don't understand how mistresses were.
Yeah, they don't care.
So Anne was also the court maid of honor to Henry's sister, Mary Tudor. So it's going to get a little weird because there's so many connections here that all connect. It's just a lot to keep up with. So
I feel like we could accurately put that gif of the dude from Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Yeah, that's basically what I was doing last night. It was like, what the... So essentially, Anne was technically the employee of Henry's sister. Also now his new secret mistress, basically, is all you need to know.
Okay, gotcha.
So again, they began secretly seeing each other behind Catherine's back, because at the age of 42, Catherine could no longer conceive children, and Henry wanted a son. So he then started to look for a way out of the marriage. With Catherine, he tried to use the excuse of incest, which is all right.
Wait, okay. How does that work?
So I'm gonna try to explain this. It's a little weird. And it's more of a hoops jumping and acrobatic things that he did in his own brain to make it work.
Okay.
So, all right. He used the excuse of incest, as Anne was the mistress of Mary's husband. So Henry's sister, who Anne worked for. Anne was the sister's husband's mistress.
Okay.
So
still doesn't register as incest.
So
it just seems like
this was the king of France
somebody
at the
with
time.
Close family ties, but not family.
He used the book of Leviticus to make an argument that a man who takes his brother's wife shall remain childless. So because he married his brother's wife after his brother died, he said that was the incest.
That's not how that works, but sure, bud. And plus, they had a child. Like that again. That still makes no sense.
Here's more of that. He didn't consider a daughter a child, and convinced the Pope that it didn't count. And after years and years of debate, I think it was like 7 years.
Foul ball. That's not how this works.
After 7 years of debate in trial, the marriage was annulled against the Pope's permission. So the Pope was like, nah, fam, that's not how it works. You're married to Catherine. It's not incest because they never had a child. Catherine's first husband, Henry's brother, they never had a child. So the Pope was like, technically, yes, but no, that's not how it works because they never had a kid, so it doesn't count. And Henry was like, well, it does count as incest, and if I were to have a son, I can't do that with Catherine because I married my brother's wife.
That the church can do nothing. What is the point?
It's insane. Okay. There's so many hoops that he had to jump through to get this to happen, but eventually...
He fought for 7 years for that, bro. Come on. Couldn't you just pay someone to poison her or something? That would have been a lot simpler and much quicker.
Right. I don't know.
I don't think you'd have to pay somebody. You could be like, guard, poison her.
Yeah,
I don't know.
There was a lot of work that I had to do to try to make this make sense, and it still doesn't make sense, but that's Henry VIII for you.
He must have not been all there mentally.
He found a way. I don't know.
I mean, when you're the king, you don't have to find a way. You can make your own way.
He did.
Exactly.
Later on, he literally made laws that, in retrospect, got these people in trouble. In 1533, while Henry was still married to Catherine, Anne became pregnant. This is maybe a month or two before their actual divorce. Anne became pregnant, and after the annulment, Henry and Anne secretly married that same year. Anne had suffered mentally and physically because she could not have a son during their marriage. And eventually Anne did give birth to a daughter who would go on to be Queen Elizabeth I, one of England's favorite queens. She was a baddie, so...
Shoddy little baddie. She my little boo. Shorty got the fatty.
All right. So
God, TikTok has ruined me.
Anne did try very desperately to keep the family together because after, I think they were only together for 3 years. After miscarrying, I think she miscarried like 4 times after having her daughter, Queen Elizabeth I.
That sucks.
He obviously became frustrated. And I think all the miscarriages were sons too. So kind of adding fuel to that fire.
He's just not meant to have one, dude.
Adding fuel to that fire. Well, I'll tell you something interesting. In between, hold on, let me scroll down to my list.
Oh, you got a list, bro.
All right, so in between Catherine and Anne, he did have another mistress that did successfully give him a son, but
so he has a mistress of a mistress.
Right. It was one of his other mistresses got pregnant and actually successfully had a living son. But because they weren't married, he couldn't become the king. So it was because it was illegitimate, the son didn't technically count.
Bro, that's just the world spiting you at this point, my guy.
It's horrible. He's the only son that he technically counted as his own son. So he was illegitimate, but he still considered him a son. And I think he did become a king later on to a different kingdom, but it's so weird.
Complete side note. Remember that video of the guy claiming to be the king of England?
The king of England, yeah.
The rightful king or whatever?
It could happen.
I mean, it could, but like he completely vanished off the face of the earth after that.
Did he?
I haven't heard anything about it.
I haven't researched anything about it.
I haven't heard anything about it. That's like a whole other video, right?
That's
or
insanity.
episode.
That is insanity. All right, so
that's a bold claim, bro.
So the last child that Anne miscarried, it actually happened during a Christmas festival, and a lot of the townspeople and the noble people that were there were just kind of like, oh, like.
Gross.
Unfortunate. And also, can you really just not have a kid? Like, what is wrong with you? Why can't you give him a son? So they started to berate her for this.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really messed up.
And like spread a lot of rumors.
That's like such a traumatic experience. First of all, that's not her first miscarriage.
Right. It was just the most public one because it was at a Christmas festival.
Yeah, but then like y'all are gonna sit there and berate her over it?
It's horrible.
God,
so she had a lot of enemies after all this time.
That's not even her fault. She can't even control that.
They didn't have the medical care they have these days.
I mean, even with that, people still miscarry.
Yeah.
It just happens sometimes.
Well, back in the day, it was
your fault.
You're
a woman.
Something was wrong with you. A lot of people started a rumor that she was a witch too, because they're like, she's sabotaging the king so his line will die and blah blah blah.
But like she would have so much more to gain by giving him a son than lose. Like
it's insane. So of course this seemed to be the last straw for Henry, as he began an affair with one of Anne's ladies in waiting. So on her court, she had ladies who would tend to her and stuff. Started to have an affair with her. And her name was Jane. And again, Anne tried very hard to keep the family together. She was like, I want to be the queen. I want to be married to you. We started this whole relationship. Like, where you going? You ain't going nowhere.
Well, see, here's the thing. He doesn't care. He just wants a son.
He doesn't. Exactly.
Like, you are trash to him.
Yeah.
He could literally just be like, I'm going to throw you away.
Right.
Look at this shiny new thing.
Basically. So Henry had given Jane a locket at one point, in secret, obviously. And Anne eventually noticed this. She's like, why do you have such nice jewelry on your neck? And where did that come from? Obviously, it was from Henry. So Anne actually ripped it off of Jane's neck so violently that Anne ended up cutting her, like putting basically a huge gash in her own hand, and bled pretty good, was how hard she ripped this necklace off.
Yo, that's some fine craftsmanship to do that.
Also that.
Like, that's some good craftsmanship. Where's that? Everything's like plastic now.
Yeah.
I would just tear away.
Production is cheaper, costs are higher. That's basically what it comes down to. So obviously Anne knew that Henry had been going behind her back to keep mistresses.
Yeah.
So she began to hire or arrange for women that she knew to try and attract him, because she's like, okay, well, if I can get my friend Stacy to go and sleep with my husband instead of some random other woman, then I know that Stacy won't allow him to end my marriage, because Stacy won't marry him, basically.
Okay.
Stuff like that. So she's like, I need to get people in there that I trust to go and be mistresses to my husband, so that
seems a little
I know that they won't take my husband.
Seems a little
I mean, if you're gonna
trusting.
I mean, I guess, but like, she's got power to, also off anybody that she doesn't like.
I mean, yeah, but
if your husband's gonna be sleeping with the King of England,
if he divorces her and then marries the friend, at that point the friend can be like,
he has to have a reason to divorce her, though, because the church won't allow it. Remember?
Yeah, okay. But I mean, clearly he can go against it with a good enough argument.
The church and the court have to agree on it. The church didn't in the last one. But the court
couldn't he just be like, well,
it.
She can't provide me a son, she's a witch? And they'd just be like,
so he did,
burn her!
He did something like that. So we'll get into that. But
oh boy.
So yeah, he did actually create a story that Anne had committed adultery, incestuous relations, and had.
What's with him and incest?
I don't know.
What are you doing?
Well, it's a like huge crime back in the day.
Well, I mean,
you could be beheaded for it.
Well, not minus the beheading part, but it's still a crime. But like, you mean to tell me that everybody you've been married to is incest?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Maybe the problem's you and not them.
he is a big problem.
I mean, yeah, he is a big problem from what I know. But I like. How is it that no one in the court was like, he's a problem?
They couldn't say anything. He was the king.
Okay. You got me on that one. Fair enough.
And obviously, he also accused her of treason because she had a plot to murder him. Is what he said.
I just rolled my eyes so hard.
It is thought that Henry tortured confessions from men to say that they had slept with Anne. And there was one man that they tortured that they got him to name 4 other men, just to kind of like pack in, layer on that fancy cake.
So literally just torture him to the point where he's just like, just name 4 people you know.
Basically, you and 4 other people, name them. And also one of the 4 people that this original guy named was Anne's brother, which is where the incest came from. Because he's like, I still have to try to prove incest, so you need to name her brother, basically. The 5 men were all charged with adultery with Anne, and less than a week later, they were all beheaded, including her brother. Who had nothing to do with this.
That's horrifying.
It is horrible.
That's disgusting, bro.
It's horrible.
Like, just name... And well, here's the thing, too. Could you imagine just going about your day?
That's what I'm saying.
And just like all of a sudden guards come to you and you're like, yeah, you were named, off your head.
Yeah, basically, that's what happened.
He just played the lottery.
Minding his own business. He had nothing to do with this. Hey, you slept with your sister. We've got to take your head.
You happen to know this one guy who knows this other guy, and he just happened to name you specifically, and then you die for it.
Basically.
Oh, bruh.
It's horrifying. In 1536, just 3 years after their marriage, Henry put her on trial. Henry claimed that he had been bewitched by Anne their whole marriage. He's like, she bewitched me. She did this to sabotage. He was kind of going off the rumors of the townspeople. He's like, she did this to sabotage my ruling, so I couldn't get a successor or whatever. Obviously, she denied all the allegations. And
is there even a point to deny him at that point?
No, basically.
At the point that the second he said that you bewitched him for the whole entire marriage, your fate was sealed.
Yeah.
Like nothing you can say.
Also, the townspeople believed it too. Yeah.
Well, one, because the king is saying it, and she's a woman, so them. They're just like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, we got you. So 4 days later, after the trial, after her denying everything, the marriage was actually annulled by the court and the Pope. because obviously,
Obviously.
the accusations were heavy. She was convicted of the charges and sentenced to death. The crimes that she was convicted of held a sentence of burning at the stake. And
called it.
Yeah. So that was, the sentence for all incestuous and adultery sort of
things.
But Henry decided that instead of burning her, he wanted to give her a swift death. And he instead ordered a expert French swordsman from France to behead her, as this would be less painful and much quicker.
Isn't it a thing though that even for 30 seconds after you've been beheaded,
I think it's muscle movement. I don't think you feel anything.
Well, it's not exactly a way to find out.
Yeah, no. Well, there was that one guy. They did want to test that when they were still doing beheadings. So they asked one of the prisoners to we're gonna behead you because that's your sentence. But if you could just do us this one solid while you die, blink for as long as you can, if you can, after you're beheaded, just to see. And that's how they learned. I think it was 30 seconds to a minute. He could still blink. So
that's horrifying.
Yeah, it's horrifying. But I think they did test that. Yeah. Now blink. Anything's I guess. Good on him. I would have shut my eyes and been nah.
I would have been angrily stared at them.
I will not blink a single time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would have, absolutely not. So she was beheaded on the same day of their annulment, 4 days after the trial. And
real quick with it.
Yeah. She was also buried that day in an unmarked grave by the chapel.
Oh, that's messed up.
Though it's okay because, it wasn't okay, obviously. But in 1876, years later, hundreds of years later, during the renovation of that chapel, she was buried. Oh, I'm sorry. Of that chapel, her remains were identified at the time, and a crest was actually built into the floor where she was originally buried.
Awesome. Cool.
So, yeah.
She deserved better.
So she deserved better. So.
She tried.
11 days after that beheading, Henry married Jane, who he was secretly seeing behind her back. She actually gave birth to his first living son. Second technically, but first legitimate living son. Yeah,
I gotcha.
And obviously it was intended that his son would go on to become the next king. However, Anne's daughter, Queen Elizabeth I, took the throne, obviously later, because she became the most beloved queen. So, sorry, Henry. Didn't matter.
Sorry, not sorry.
In 1537, 12 days after Jane gave birth to their son, Prince Edward, Jane actually ended up dying from infection of the birth.
Ooh.
Or from the birth.
That sounds awful.
So, and I think she was technically Henry's quote unquote favorite wife because she actually was able to give him a son, and she didn't die. The marriage literally only lasted less than a year. So there wasn't time for him to become bitter against her or whatever. So after Jane's death, he married another diplomatic woman, and this marriage was quickly annulled by both Henry and his new wife because they just didn't. It was for political reasons, but they were just no, I don't really, this is not gonna work or whatever. So a lot of people, historians and stuff, do speculate that the annulment happened because Henry had actually met a 17-year-old girl and kind of was pining after her during their marriage. So the age of this woman is speculated by historians. She could have either been 17, 18, or 19. They're not technically sure, but still back in the day, the age of being married to a king, I guess. This woman was Catherine Howard. At the time that they met, again, she was either 17, 18, or 19, and he was 49 years old.
Disgusting.
Which at the time, I think the middle age was 30 years old. Life expectancy was 50s to 60s. So he was old, an old man at that time. Catherine Howard was, here's some more family tree for you to try to fit into your brain.
Okay.
Catherine Howard was a first cousin and lady in waiting to Anne Boleyn. So she was Anne's first cousin.
Gotcha. Okay.
And she did come from a kingdom of great wealth and prestige, Catherine did. So when she met King Henry, their kingdom wasn't like in shambles or whatever, but there was still like not a lot of people favored the king. You know, they were still, they love drama, so they still speculated against his wives. But
same. I also love drama.
It's still there. You know, he was kind of paranoid about a lot of things because there was a lot of rumors coming from under the other kingdoms about invasions and stuff. So he kind of grew paranoid in his old age and that sort of thing. So the kingdom wasn't really like as nice as the one that Catherine came from. Eventually, of course, after the annulment, Henry did make Catherine Howard his wife. So this is the second Catherine he's married. So she was his fourth wife, and the marriage did actually only last 2 years.
God.
Again, because Henry did grow paranoid and his, you know, the kingdom was not up to standard, basically. There were rumors that spread again through the townsfolk that Catherine wouldn't last that long and would be cast aside for the next shiny new toy or whatever. So not a lot of people expected it to go very well, or whatever.
When you're sitting here just going through a bunch of people like that, of course people are going to be saying
they're like,
things.
oh, how long will this one last, basically? Yeah.
And lo and behold.
Catherine did constantly feel like very overwhelmed with her new position because she was very young. She didn't have a lot of experience, you know, as a new queen, basically. She was previously a ward to, again, because she was Anne's lady in waiting, so she wasn't. I think she was a princess, but a lot of the time kings would send their daughters and sons to other kingdoms to kind of like
court.
Yeah, to their court to learn kind of how political things run and how to be a king or a queen, how to run things. And that's what Catherine was doing with Anne before, you know, Anne's head got chopped off and she was sent back to her hometown. So, so she did feel very overwhelmed with her new position because, again, she wasn't doing it for long before she's now the Queen of England. And she was actually, Henry put her in charge of like a lot of land and a lot of like just overseeing a lot of servants in the kingdom and, you know, the townspeople and stuff like that. So she was constantly kind of anxious about stuff. Catherine had been involved, obviously, with previous relationships before her marriage, as people do. One relationship was with a man in her hometown of Lambeth, is where she was from. And his name was Francis Dereham. Francis was a secretary to the Duchess of Lambeth. So
fancy title.
Not really like royalty, but he was the secretary to the Duchess.
Yeah, like, you know, next in line. Not next in line, but like
he was on her court.
Yeah.
Is what it was. Catherine Anne Dereham.
Right hand. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Like the right hand.
So Catherine and Dereham did become lovers. It wasn't ever like, they didn't ever get married because, again, she was only like less than 18 or 17 at this time, but they were both roughly the same age and, you know, they liked each other. So they did call each other like husband and wife, though they weren't married. And she would take care of things for him, like keeping his money for him while he was away on trips or, you know, kind of tending to him whenever he needed something done, like going to get food or whatever. But there was another relationship previous to Henry that it's kind of weird because while she was in Henry's kingdom under Anne, she did meet Henry's favorite male courtier, which is like kind of a person in your posse. So kind of like a court, but more of a posse to walk around and look like you have friends.
Gotcha.
And his name was Thomas Culpeper.
It's a cool last name.
Yeah. She had previously considered marrying Thomas, but obviously this didn't happen. And it was alleged that the two were secretly meeting while she was married to Henry. Interestingly, these meetings were arranged by Jane Boleyn, who's Anne's sister-in-law. So Jane Boleyn was actually married to Anne's brother, who was beheaded because of the whole incest trial and things.
Okay.
So while after all that had happened, while Catherine was now married to Henry, his sister-in-law started arranging. It's hard. His sister-in-law started arranging these meetings behind Henry's back, and I think that's funny as heck. Because it's kind of like, all right, well, you killed my husband and my sister-in-law, so I'm gonna start arranging mistresses to go behind your back or I'm sorry, misters behind your back to sleep with your new queen. So,
hey man, that's pretty petty, and I'm there for it.
It's petty, but like, come on, you saw what happened to Anne, man. Like, really? She's only like 19 at most. Like, come on.
Might as well go out swinging.
There were later witnesses to Catherine being unfaithful, so people did see that she was walking around with Culpeper, and a lot of them got the idea to instead go to the king, start blackmailing Catherine, and they would ask for her favors instead of telling the king. So for their silence, they were like, all right, well, you're going to do this favor for me.
She's like, no, I want you to tell him.
No, she didn't. Yeah. She knew what happened to Anne. So there was a man named...
So funny how the king could be unfaithful, but the queen cannot.
Yeah, that's just how it went.
Yeah.
That's just how it went.
I'm just saying, that's just funny to me.
One of the witnesses was the sister to a man named... I can't pronounce this. I think it's John Lascelles. I think it's Lascelles. I don't know.
Lascelles.
And John had actually tried to persuade his sister to find a way into the queen's court. But his sister refused, as she had actually claimed to seen how Catherine had quote-unquote conducted herself while she lived in her hometown of Lambert. Because obviously, like, Catherine had loved this other guy, Dereham.
Yeah.
And this woman was a witness to seeing, like, she was sleeping with this guy or whatever. So obviously, like, I don't want to be on her court because now she's married to another guy. And that's promiscuous. Anyway.
Sure, bud.
So John took that information given by his sister to the archbishop of the church, who then the archbishop interrogated the sister, who told the archbishop that Catherine had sexual relations with a ward, or while she was a ward, before her marriage to the king. Which, yeah, okay.
Whatever, yeah.
So after the investigation of the archbishop, a love letter was found in Thomas Culpeper's room written by Catherine.
That's why you use code names.
The archbishop also learned of the relationship that she had with Dereham before the marriage. Obviously, he went to the king with his findings, and it was arranged for counselors to question Catherine. So like a formal investigation. During the questioning, Catherine became so distraught that the counselors had actually had items in her room removed for fear that she would commit suicide. Like, dang,
what all did they do to her?
I think it was
they
just
had to have like tortured her.
Maybe, but
for her to do that,
I don't understand like why you would try to get her on relationships that she had before the king. Obviously, like people had seen her while she was with the king. Yeah. With this other guy, but you can just get her on that. Yeah, the stuff before it doesn't matter.
I don't know.
So after establishing that she had had an affair, it was noted that Henry would be able to simply annul their marriage and banish her from the court into poverty and disgrace. Unfortunately, Catherine's relationship with Dereham would have effectively ended Catherine and Henry's marriage. So she denied all the allegations because she still wanted to be queen, I guess. She did deny all the allegations and claimed that he had raped her instead.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, you just lost a lot of cool points with me.
She did end up getting stripped of her title as queen in 1541 and was imprisoned. Culpeper and Dereham were tried for treason.
Jesus.
And were both executed in December of that same year, with Culpeper beheaded and Dereham being hanged, then drawn and quartered, with both of their heads placed on spikes and on the London Bridge, and they stayed there for something like 8 years.
Wow.
So.
A little excessive.
Horrifying. That's horrible. There was no formal trial for Catherine, and she was actually held until King Henry could make a law that made that a queen consort must disclose her sexual history with the king within 20 days of being married, or if she incited that a man commit adultery with her, this would result in death if she failed to disclose the 20 days, or if she incited that another man sleep with her, she could be sentenced to death. So this wasn't a law, before when all this happened, but she was held in jail until they could make it a law and used that law to convict her retroactively.
I'm sorry, but come on. What other response do you have for that? What?
He's insane. She had spent the night before. This is super sad. She had spent the night before her execution practicing with a block of, I think it's a block of wood or something. She was practicing laying her head down gracefully and trying not to like freak out while she was going to be executed.
That's horrifying.
It's horrifying. And it's said that she, on the day of her execution the next day, she needed assistance climbing the steps because she was obviously distraught and like weak. You know, I would be too. Same. Her final words were for those of the townspeople to pray for her soul for what she had done. And then her very last sentence was, I die a queen. I love this though. I die a queen, but I would rather have died the wife of a Culpeper.
Hey, petty.
Get out of here, Henry.
I'm about that.
So Henry's life.
That was a nice little jab right there at the end, dude. I'm about it.
I die a queen. I got to live as a queen, but I would rather have married this other guy. So, well, Henry didn't even go to her execution either.
Wow.
The last time he saw her.
She pretty much just told everybody there, just like, Henry ain't shit,
yeah.
bro.
The last time Henry actually saw her was her trial. So
wow,
he never came to see her while
so
she was in jail.
You literally get this woman sentenced to death and then you don't even go to it.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's insane. Henry's late life wasn't great though, so there was some good news in this, I guess. He was injured in a jousting accident while he was married to Anne Boleyn. And he'd actually sustained an injury to his leg and a possible concussion that put him into, like, he passed out for 2 hours.
So like a big time concussion.
Yeah, so he passed out for like 2 hours.
Oh,
and
dang.
A lot of people were afraid that like he was about to die or whatever, but he sustained this leg injury that made it, like, he couldn't walk on it anymore, basically. So he had to get around with basically a peg leg, not a peg leg, but like wood, like a brace. That's what I'm looking for.
Oh, okay, brace.
Like a brace and a cane or whatever. After, like, while he was with Anne Boleyn.
I'm sure that's not a good look as a king.
Many historians do actually believe that the concussion caused brain damage, and that's what made him, like, incredibly ill-tempered and very, like...
Yeah, that's what it was.
Like,
it had nothing to do with before.
It was on with it before, but I think that's right, and that it did kind of exacerbate, like just kind of made it worse, you know?
Maybe.
Certainly didn't help it, but as he grew older, Henry did become obese due to his inability to move, and he eventually needed to be moved by mechanical means. So, like, they had to build machinery for him to get moved around.
If you get to that point where, like, back in the day, they had to find out how to build machinery for you, you got a problem.
So he ended up dying in 1547 at the age of 55. Before his death, he did plan to be placed in a tomb, though the tomb was never completed, and he was instead put into the vault at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle, next to his wife, Jane Seymour, who, again, was his favorite wife because, you know, he didn't have to be with her long, but she did give him a son or whatever. And that's where he remains to this day. So that's the story of Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard. There is a lot more to King Henry VIII's life that I could have put into this, but I wanted to focus on their deaths because not only were they horrible, but it's literally murder.
Yeah.
He framed them for crimes they didn't do and got them killed because he was upset at them and he wanted to marry somebody else. Like, bro, come on.
Yeah.
So I do actually have a list of his wives and children.
Oh,
so
okay.
Very quickly, just to like tell you kind of what was going on. I'm not including mistresses, but like, except for the one that gave him his son. Just women that gave him children and that he was legitimately married to. So his first wife was Catherine of Aragon. She had, so this is a list of her children. She had a stillborn daughter. Then she gave birth to Henry, the Duke of Cornwall. So the first son, but he did die in infancy, so didn't technically count for Henry. She then went on to give birth to 2 more sons that also died like very quickly after birth. She did give birth to Queen Mary I, who did survive, the only surviving daughter from that marriage, went on to be queen in another kingdom. And then she gave birth to a stillborn daughter. The second woman to give him children was that mistress that gave birth to his first son that lived. But again, illegitimate child, so couldn't be king. And her name was Elizabeth Blount. He was then married to Anne Boleyn, who gave birth to Queen Elizabeth I, who also never married. Queen Elizabeth I, she just was queen and was
I'm ruling this.
Really good at it.
Hey.
Also, I didn't tell you this, but Anne Boleyn and Queen Elizabeth I were gingers.
Hey.
They had like fiery red hair, and a lot of people like were super into that.
Hey, same.
Anne Boleyn did also have 3 miscarried sons. So
I just think he just wasn't meant to have a son.
Yeah. So Jane Seymour was his 3rd wife, and this is the one that died right after giving birth to his first legitimate son, who became the prince. King Edward VI went on to be king in another kingdom. His next 3 wives, none of them gave him children or had any miscarriages. They were just kind of married to him. There was Anne of Cleves, was his 4th wife. His 5th wife was Catherine Howard, and his 6th wife was Catherine Parr.
Okay.
And that's the end of that.
Wild, bro.
So all of these women have like crazy stories with this guy, but again, I wanted to focus on the murders of the 2. So
well, I see why.
It's insane. There's so much drama. It's super messed up, and I need to go watch The Tudors now, which is on Netflix. Netflix sponsors. Because I need more information. Like, obviously it's dramatized, but
I mean, still kind of holds the same thing.
I literally did like hours and hours of research just trying to get a consecutive order of relevant drama that went on into killing his 2 wives.
Hey,
there's a lot. If you guys like that episode, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at What Sleep Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at What Sleep Pod. You can also follow our YouTube channel where we post all of our audio episodes. And don't forget to look us up on Instagram at What Sleep Podcast to see pictures and stuff. I didn't show you pictures. My bad.
That's fine.
That's fine. I'll post them to the Instagram.
Yeah, I'll see it on Insta.
Just to see pictures and stuff of, I'm going to post King Henry last, obviously. But I'll post pictures of this episode of King Henry VIII, Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, and Queen Elizabeth I because I like her. So don't forget, we do have t-shirts still. We still have a ton of t-shirts available for you guys, and you guys could support the podcast by purchasing those shirts, or you can sign up for a Patreon. It would really help us out. We can get another mic and stop yelling at the single mic in between us.
Yeah, the second mic would really up the quality a little bit.
Hopefully up some quality for you guys. We would really appreciate it. We'll see you guys in the next episode.
Yeah.
So we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.